Hey, Road Warriors and Care Crew. Welcome to the Care in Motion podcast, the new home for the home health clinician. We're going to talk through stories and tips around safety, efficiency, clinical issues, and career pathways, all from the perspective of a few road warriors just like yourself to provide their insight. Our goal here is that you'll find this weekly podcast helpful, relatable, and interesting, but most importantly, wildly entertaining during your daily drive. There we go. All right, let's jump into the next version of the Care Motion podcast. So excited to be talking today about something that I know is really top of mind and constantly comes up, and just in general, a topic of conversation across the board. And it's something that we touched on at the very end of the last one, which is documentation efficiency, documentation best practices, and really ways to not be staying up until midnight or working over the weekend to get things done that we probably wanted to get finished, not at midnight at home. So as usual, we have the usual suspects and the folks that have figured out, some of the keys to success here. So really excited to be with you guys again. I hope everyone's had a great week. I'm traveling, so I'm dialing in from a hotel room right now. So it looks like you guys at least made it home for the day and you're not doing documentation.
All done.
All done.
In the past.
So how are you able to sit at home in the comfort of your rocking chairs and whatnot and not have to worry about an entire night's worth of work?
So I've been in home care for 19 years, and it's been a work in progress and an art. It is truly an art to learning the master of efficiency, the mastery of efficiency. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down, well, there are about a million things that I think are going to be exciting to talk about today, but to break it down, and I'm not going to steal the entire show, I'm going to talk for a minute, but I think a lot of it comes down to our personalities, and number one, we do have to set a precedent on day one that it is expected that we are doing point of care documentation during our visits. It is something that companies actually expect for a good reason. We remember the valid information that we just learned from the patients right then and there, and it's much more pertinent and specific information than if I were to wait until 8 hours later when everything is like, when I've seen 6 or 7 patients, whatever, and it becomes way more generic, and less specific and detailed. So I think it's really good practice, but it is an art. And so I think setting the precedent on day one and letting Mrs. Jones know, listen, this is kind of an expectation that what we do. I'm not going to be typing for 4 minutes without looking at you, because that's not appropriate. It's not respectful. That's not okay. But am I going to be typing in between us talking and a little bit while you're talking and telling me about your weekend? It's how I get the best information in there. And then you better believe every single break that we take between exercises, I am typing away, so that halfway through the visit, I'm already essentially halfway done with my visit note. And as we're wrapping things up and cleaning things up, I'm still typing. So it has been a work in progress. But I'll tell you, if I'm a lot of, like today, 3 out of my 4, so I'm 32 hours. I had 3 visits in an eval today. Long story short, 3 out of my 4 were completely done before I left the house. And the last one, I went for a walk and did some voice dictation and finished up. But whatever I don't finish in the car or in the home, I finish in the car before I go to my next patient. And I just feel like it takes 20% of the weight off your shoulders, boom, onto the next, because I have done the other stuff in the past. And for me, it never felt good at all. And it didn't last long. I was like, it took me 3 times longer to do it in my home because I had tons of distraction. Even if I was alone, I still was distracted. So that's just me, but I want to give other people a chance to speak because there's a lot of good stuff that I think we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you ought to find out what works for you as well, because for me personally, I don't mind doing my documentation at home, but my documentation at home time is from like 2 to 4, right? So I'm not documenting a lot of the times when I have my kids running around. I try and finish my day as best I can, and then I come home and document on my couch or somewhere that's comfortable for me versus sitting in my car. But one thing that I like to do is build in 5 minutes at minimum after my patient where I sit down and I get everything of that pertinent information out, because I will not remember it when I get home and I have to have something that I'm going to reference. I do think it's good to find the tricks to tell your patients why you're documenting in their home. And my phrase that I use a lot is, I just need to get this down so I'll remember, because I won't remember at home. And I tell them that, I need to type this information down so that I remember. And they usually laugh because they're like, yeah, I wouldn't remember either. It's 6 hours. I said, I'm not going to remember this 6 hours from now. And we won't remember. You won't remember in as good of detail 6 hours later, right? It's just a fact. You won't put in all the specifics and the skilled documentation that were required at home. You just won't. So I think I personally try and get everything as much as I can done in the home. When I have heavier weighted visits, like the Oasis visits, the started cares, the evals, some of that I'm spending more time at home doing. If I have a routine visit, that's done. That's done before I'm off to my next patient. So, but that's just what works for me personally.
I'm gonna side with Dan here, Lisa. I'm just like him. I want to actually be in my car, a little bit uncomfortable, just trying to get my stuff done right away, because otherwise, when I'm home, I'm dad. I'm present. I'm with my kids. I want to be there and everything else. But for me, I think one of the most important things that I've learned is just knowing your software and knowing like how your documentation works, right? What system you're using, what little tricks or tools that you can use to help speed up some things a little bit, right? Or is there some generic phrases that you can use, and then you go into the more specific details to help save yourself some time and be more efficient. So I think there's a lot of things that we come across in a daily documentation, but it really depends on what tools you have available. I mean, even for myself, I know, so even before visits, right? Like as soon as I pull up to the patients, obviously from a chart review, there might be certain things I can fill in, right? If I'm doing an eval, I can probably fill in their medical history. Now, am I still going to go into further detail when I'm in the visit? If they say, hell yeah, I also had cancer and I had my gallbladder, of course, yeah, I'll add that in. But I can get a pretty good gist and maybe a little bit of a jump start of my notes, so that as soon as I'm in that door, I'm still hitting the ground running and I have some documentation already knocked out. So that's kind of what I use.
Nice.
Question. Well, just wondering, Lisa, you said something a little bit different than what Dan and Brendan said. So, like, Dan, let's pretend that you're an expert in this, and you're meeting with Lisa to do some coaching, and Lisa, let's pretend that you have set a goal of just never taking anything home from this point forward, which is clearly not maybe one of your goals, but maybe you were. Like, what would you kind of walk through, maybe Dan and Brendan, to just be like, well, why do you do this and why do you do that? And, have you thought about this and why doesn't that work? If somebody came to you and said, I don't want to ever take anything home anymore, but I'm doing kind of what Lisa's doing.
I think number one, I respect the fact that, everyone is different. Our personalities are different. And I love the fact that, just to get back to what Lisa was saying, I mean, if that's worked for you, and you're able to get yourself like focused from 2 to 4 and you're alone, I mean, that's cool, right? And we're all different. But if you had the goal today of saying, hey, Dan, like, what are some of the things that you do to to make sure you come home without, so some things that I do, I have to say, I mean, like those longer visits, the longer weighted visits, like the evals, the Oasis discharges, because I'm not finishing those in the home. I'll get some stuff in, I'll not finish it in the home. But what I do is, because I know that I can't concentrate well in my home environment, I will sit in my car for longer. I will stand up and walk around and get it done. We just switched softwares to Home Care Home Base from Epic. I used to be pinned under a laptop, and that's all I knew forever. I mean, when I first came out of home care, when I first got into home care, I was in paper documentation, like Oasis, like 9 photocopies, like all over my dashboard. It was insane. But then it was laptops. That's all I knew. I thought that was how it was going to be forever. Now I'm on a phone with voice dictation, which for me has been absolutely tremendous. I was nervous about it. It has been fantastic. So, I mean, as far as using the technology to our advantage with those things, I definitely do that. I think we have to be super careful because we can be super tempted to do it while driving. I do not want to do that when I'm driving. I'm just having a dad moment with my friends and peers here. Don't do that. No, but but you park in your car. I see Lisa. We park in our car, we do our thing, and there's always going to be outliers. There are always going to be the ones that are more hands-on, that are modern max assist patients who I know it's going to be harder to get that note done in that house. Let those be the outliers. Let those be the ones that are going to, but let's try to keep our the routine, visits that are, the ones that are quite, what I mean by saying easy, where they're pretty predictable, and use that rest time, because every patient needs rest time, and use that rest time for talking and doing your notes, getting your subjective down like in the first 5 minutes, and banging away at the other stuff. Obviously when there's new medications and things like that and all these extra stuff, I mean, do those things add up? Yes, they do. But again, that's the reason why I give a 30-minute window, is to accommodate for any, a little bit lengthier visits. But even if I have a longer visit than typical, I still really try hard to get that note done, that routine visit note done, like Lisa was saying, before I go to my next patient. Evals take longer, but my evals now do not take as long as they used to a year, 2 years, 5 years ago, again, because of voice dictation, which, I'm excited about that. So did that answer part of your question, Dano?
Yeah.
Okay.
But Dan, always read what you speak, because I can tell you many times I've looked at things and I'm like, the hairy dog did what? And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is not what I said. So
yeah, it happened to me yesterday. I said sit to stand, and it wrote S and then 3 asterisks to make it sound like a curse word.
there you go.
So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, very
Yeah.
important to read. You're absolutely right.
They updated our keyboard, our dictation service, to a more medical dictation service, and it's 1,000 times better. It's so nice. It recognizes, I can dictate all the medications, and I'm not even pronouncing the medications right, and it will still spell them right. It's fantastic.
Oh, really?
But I voice dictate a lot of my notes. I'll voice dictate my entire evaluation, and then I copy and paste that into my interventions. But for me, like what you're speaking of, you two don't mind being like in your car and documenting. I prefer to be at home and finishing my documentation. And Brendan said, when I'm at home, I'm in dad mode with my kids. But when I'm home and working, my kids aren't home, they're in school, right? So I'm not documenting, during dinner time. Now I do have those days where it all just kind of, it kind of goes to crap. But most of my visits that I'm doing are the heavily documentation visits. So I'm only doing evaluations, admissions, research, reassessments. So all of my visits are those visits that require a lot more documentation time than routine visits. I only maybe see one routine a week if it's somebody that's, requested me. So that's where I'm spending more of my documentation, but I'm being done in business hours, right? Or I will push that off to the side if I'm choosing to go run errands if I need to, because I don't have time otherwise. But that's what works to me and is my personal choice. But where I don't understand when people are taking that documentation from 6 p.m. to midnight. No one should be documenting at midnight, right? And then you're pushing things back the next day or 2 days later. You have all these notes built up. How are you, that's just overwhelming, right? So what can you be doing to be finishing those in a timely manner with everything that you guys are both saying?
Yeah.
But
And
I
it's,
think what you're saying is kind of what we alluded to in previous episodes. And Dan, I think you mentioned it once before, is burnout, right? Is being burned out, or maybe taking on too much. You know what I mean? And I think that's where, I think we're all saying in different ways, is finding time for something that's comfortable for you to be efficient and effective in your documentation, whether that's in the home, in the car, at your house, like wherever that may be. But I think just understanding you the most, right? You yourself, and what environment is productive for you is the most critical thing. Because I know for me, like Lisa, like you were just saying, I know the hours that I do get home, my kids are, I have two little ones. They're not even school age, so they're running into my arms right away. And it's like there's only so much I can do besides and I just want to play with them. I haven't seen them all day, right, and everything else. So I think, I mean, to summarize, I think what we're all saying is that, like, find that most productive, efficient, and effective environment to really have success here across the board.
definitely. And I think it sounds like the three of us are quite efficient with our documentation. I know there are people listening, and I know that I've met so many that really struggle with that piece. But it goes beyond documentation, honestly, and I think it kind of takes a dive into your day. Like if you're doing your paperwork between 7 and 11 every night and having a hard time getting it done, there's definitely parts of the day that need some improvements. And I say that in the kindest way possible. But I mean, I'm talking within the visits, like what is going on in the visit? Are your visits way too long? Are you in every routine visit for 55 minutes and having a hard time leaving because you feel bad because it's the only people that these people talk to? Is it that you are taking too much on, like Brendan was saying? Are you driving 45 minutes between patients and not being rewarded for that productivity wise? You know what I mean? There's so many different variables, but if it is the piece of you just can't get out of the houses in a timely manner and you don't like to document anything in the home, it really does take breaking some really, really bad habits a little piece at a time, because a lot of people that I see have been doing home care 15, 20 years, but still are bringing tons of paperwork home. And it's like, there definitely are some habits that need to be broken, and it can be really hard to do.
And I think you lead to another point, and I'm going to bring us all in and get your guys' suggestions. But I know, like, for me personally, right, like I have a set structure, like, and I think you spoke to this, Dan, too, right? Within the first 5 minutes, I'm getting my subjective, I'm getting, their vital signs, I'm getting all that information right off the bat, right? And then from there, the thing I might leave open is my assessment, but I'm at least going to put down the exercises or activities or whatever we did throughout the session. And if I have to expand more or explain how we did it in detail, I will do that at a later date. But I mean, the other thing I also think about too is, when, and something that's been told to me for a long time, I'm curious what you guys think, but, as I'm doing my assessment, it should be telling a story, right? Every visit that you're doing should be telling a story moving forward about, what does this patient's medical record really look like? So if you really think about it, you're kind of building a chapter, building and building and building. So, if you said something last chapter, if it's not that important, then that's something that you move on. And you need to really think about how to be, efficient in your wording to be effective, right? Because I think sometimes some therapists get into too much detail about certain things, and it's like, is that the most pertinent information to show that this is progress, or to show that that person has improved in
Yeah.
this? And I think that's something that we really need to get down to the bells and whistles that's going to prove, hey, I need more visits for Sally because she's really struggling right now, right? Is
I
that
think
root cause or
that's a
other
great
stuff?
point.
So
Yeah. I also, and
I
I
think
don't know,
that's a great point. Go ahead.
I'm sure you guys have this, but I have a lot of templates saved, right? That are just my general reassessment templates that show comparative data that I just paste it. I change the numbers. It has all my nice wording and skilled documentation. I alter it when I need to, but it's pretty much, the same. I'm just changing the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Same for discharge summaries and exercises, right? Because we do a lot of the same, not the same thing for every person, but we have our same things that we use, and then we can um, individualize it. But we write a lot of the same things, right? Education wise. So that I think saves a lot of time with documentation. I can paste those in, edit them real quick, and I'm on my way.
So do you, question, Lisa, when you do your templates, are they very generic where it can be either gender, right? It's gender neutral, or do you do a female and a male template? Because I know for myself, I've noticed that to even save myself more time, I try to just keep it as gender neutral, like the patient, using
I
the
just say
patient.
patient.
Exactly, right? And I think it sounds crazy, but I mean, if I have templates even like you just said, and I'm changing all the his to hers, or you know what I mean, like that takes time out of my day. That's lost time there, and that's less efficient. So I mean, these are just like little things that I think about to try to help improve. And I know, Dan, you're probably a little different, right? Because you're dictating, so that's going to be a whole different thing. But if you're copy and pasting things, it's just like, just ways to speed up things ever so slightly. I mean, and that sounds crazy, but like, even just doing those little things can save you minutes, which can be
Yeah.
another minute that you have that FaceTime with that patient, which is more
Yeah.
impactful for them. And even though you're only in there for maybe 30-35 minutes, give or take, those 30-35 minutes are probably more impactful than, some long-winded therapist who's there for 60 minutes, who's, it's really depends on how you approach it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've all read notes that, from start of care clinicians where occasionally you'll read these notes where you're like, that is more information than I don't think I ever needed to know. Like so much, and I think sometimes clinicians get concerned and nervous because my gosh, healthcare is so meticulous and everything is about perfection. So they feel like they have to add everything. And if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. And I understand all that, but there also is an art to being succinct but thorough with the necessary stuff.
Dan, it's one of the things that you've said a couple times now, like tonight and previously. It sounds like it's all about like that upfront expectations and that upfront conversation, and almost like eliminating maybe some of that guilt that what you're doing is being perceived as, and I've seen some of your stuff on social media where it's like you're playing Block Blast or something. You know what I mean? Like, do you think I'm like emailing and texting? So like, how do you phrase it? How do you get past what might be sort of that guilt that some people must feel that, okay, I'm taking away time from patient care to do what might be perceived as like just messing around?
It depends on the personalities of the patients, but I think number one on our evaluation while we're there, I like to say, I'm going to be documenting while we're talking. It's something that's expected that I do so that I, like Lisa said, so while it's fresh in my head, I get it down. But I'm also going to be listening to you, and I'm here because I care and I want to be able to help you. And so I'm not going to be, typing the entire time. It's just going to be during your breaks and while we're having, while we're, resting and whatnot. And as far as, I think I mentioned this prior, but the setting the precedent, because we have a lot of patients who don't know what to expect as far as the length of our visits. A lot of them assume it's an hour. I mean, I get that a lot, and so that's where I just feel like, yeah, it's huge. My general visits are going to be in the 40-minute range. Here's what to expect. This is what we're going to be working on, and I will be typing. So I have a Bluetooth keyboard, a Bluetooth full-size keyboard, and I'm a fast typer. I'm a wedding pianist too, and I don't know if it goes hand in hand, but I just bang out while we're talking, and there is an art. I mean, it's gonna sound weird and not nice on here, but like I'm giving eye contact while I'm typing, and I'm hearing like 98% of it. You know what I mean? Like, am I giving them like 1,000% attention while I'm typing? No, but then that's that art, But then I'll pause and I'll be like, so you told me that you're in 6 out of 10 pain and it hurt more when you do this, because you do have to pause to give really your full attention, right? So yeah, there is that art to it, but I'll tell you, when you're good at it and patients know that you care and you pause to let them know that you care and you give them that direct eye contact, that's really all the stuff that they need. And when they know that they've been or when they feel that they've been heard.
And to kind of go off that, right, is one, to know that they've been heard. Something I always do is the read back mechanism, right? It's just always be like, hey, you said that your pain's an 8 out of 10. Did I hear you right? Like it hurts, and I think that's one way to really see how much you're comprehending. But Dan, I'm gonna just off a little bit what you're saying. Like at the end of the day, and Dan Haggerty, I'm gonna go off what you said too for a minute, because I'm not taking away from their visit. This is mandatory for what they need, right? At the end of the day, this is my job, but this is required documentation to prove that they need my help or my care, right? And that's something that's been explained to me, and something that has been passed along to me, that, if I have to call the doctor, if I have to do, those are all things that are pertinent to your care in the grand scheme of things to be moving forward. And the thing I also think about too, and I think that as clinicians, we all should think about, is that even though I might not be able to do every little detail with you in the home, home care, it's about having that. I say it's a coach-player relationship, right? Like I should be able to teach you things, and you should be able to continue to do that stuff when I'm not there, right? So I should have time to document. I should have time to show you things, but then we should be able to build off that and not feel guilty. I think that's the biggest thing. I think the first and foremost thing is, don't feel guilty about documenting, because it's a necessary means to get the visits, to get authorizations, to get everything that you need for that patient to be successful. Because I mean, the other way I look at it is, God forbid you aren't documenting, you're late on documentation, the insurance needs those notes, they're not done. Now you're not seeing the patient anyway. You know what I mean? And that's the bottom line.
Yep.
I think one thing that's always I've never understood, and I would love to hear from you guys how this happens and what's happening behind the scenes. I've known a couple of therapists that will sort of talk to them and be like, "Hey, like we can't send you anything more because you've got notes that are over a week, due, and it's like 30." And it's like, oh, I'm catching up this weekend. How is it even possible to be able to go back for that many? Like, I mean, it's not possible, is it?
It's such a bad idea. And I have to say, my company is so strict. We have our notes have to be in by 7 the next morning, period. Start of care is 2. I don't know if every company's like that, but I think it's a really, really, really healthy approach, because I see how this stuff can happen. Like I've worked in outpatient clinics where I saw people like taking notes home, and like, and it was taking days and days and days to get the stuff done. You'd cover for them, and like you didn't know anything because their notes weren't in. It's like it's not good practice. You kind of have to look at it like, if I'm sick tomorrow, I need people to know what the heck to do here with these patients to pick up. So I really think it's a healthy approach for companies to have that expectation that your paperwork needs to be in by the next morning, because otherwise care cannot be completed the way that it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to simple things like, God forbid, their blood pressure was higher than usual, right? And you noticed that yesterday, but I'm seeing them today. Well, I can look back at your notes and see that, but if it's not done, it's not submitted. I don't know that, and these are little things, but I mean, they become major things, or this is what becomes the flaws. This is what leads to lawsuits and stuff sometimes,
Yep.
unfortunately. And I mean, I know for myself. Think about, like, at the end of the day, I know we all have checklists and things, and you're going throughout. But do you want to feel bogged down and be like, oh, I have 8 million things to do, or do you want to start your day fresh, a new page every day? It's like, hey, let's go get it, And I think that's the thing that is most important to remember, is that as much as it might be grueling, and that's why it's so important to find. I think, like we've been saying, what's efficient and effective for you. You have to find a way. And I mean, Dan, you said 19 years, right? I've been doing this 10 years myself. So, like, together, that's a long period of time. I didn't learn it overnight. It took me time to figure out what's best for me. And I know, Lisa, you're probably in the same boat, right? Everybody has their slight nuances, and I don't think any one of us can tell a perfect example about what this is or how to do it. But I think as time goes on, you pick up these little nitty-gritty details, and you keep kind of weaving it into your documentation, your memory bank, and how you do things. And long story short, you get what you get at the end of the day. And it's like, hey, that's it. And you just kind of solve that puzzle. But it doesn't happen overnight. And I think, you got to start losing the emotion, losing the guiltiness, all the things that we've said in the past, and just kind of just do it, because it's a mandatory required thing that we all need to do, and we just got to get it done. And I mean, no one likes it. I'll be the first to say I hate documentation, and this is me who's documented for 10 years now, and I'd be like, if we didn't have to document, I want to do it, but I know it's required. I know it's mandatory for set reasons, and I understand all those things, but we just have to learn what's best for us.
I think a big thing where you have somebody that's 30 notes behind too is also, as a clinician, being able to say no when your schedulers try and add on more and more people. Oh, can you just squeeze in this visit? And now you went from having a day of 5 patients to 6 or 7, and that documentation is going to add up. Even if you are as efficient as you can be, you're working what should be an 8-hour day to now a 10-hour day, and you didn't have time for that, right? So usually something has to give, and that's your documentation, right? You just leave it and it builds up. So I think it's one, either being not an efficient documenter, or you're doing too much, right? You're taking on too many patients, and they're just building up over time, and knowing when you can just say no.
And I think, to go with that, Lisa and Dan, you mentioned it, is the quality, right? We always talk about quality of care, quality of this, quality. That's the only word you hear thrown around constantly. But if you're 30 notes behind, is that quality care you're giving them? You know what I mean? You're worried about your notes. You're worried about the next patient. You're worried about, I think you have to start worrying about yourself, right? What quality are you giving somebody at that point in time? And I mean, that's just being true to yourself as a therapist. You're not really going to be able to showcase your skill set, your brilliance. We've all worked hard. We've all got these degrees. I mean, most of us have doctorates, I would say, at this point in time, right? If not all of us. And it's not an easy. I'm sorry, Dan Haggerty, you can't say that right now, right? That's one you can't say. But
I have my master's only. That's it.
But it still has taken a lot of time and dedication,
Yeah.
and you get to prove your worth every single visit you're there, right? And I think that's important to do as well. And it's like, you don't do that to yourself. Value your time, value the documentation, because it's part of care. It's part of what you do.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable to be 30 notes behind and to feel like you feel like you're sinking if you're in that boat. So yes, I fully agree.
All right, guys, bring it home, everybody. 30 seconds. What's one thing that somebody can do today, tonight, tomorrow, make it better, different, faster?
I'll start because it's fresh in my mind. If you are someone listening who swears to yourself that you cannot start documentation in the home because of X, Y, and Z, whatever the reason is, tomorrow is the time to start trying at least a little bit of documentation in the home. It doesn't have to be the whole note. It doesn't have to be 75% of the note, but start little, because you have to try it in order to make progress. Start with 25% of the note, and you're going to find, holy smokes, I just got home a little bit early. Why? Because of that. Just start little and build on it, and I promise you can do it.
I'd say same thing as Dan. Do it and tell your patients why, right? Say, I just need to get this information down so I have the most accurate depiction of our session, right? And patients, they don't mind. They really don't mind. Now, if you're staring at your tablet the entire 45 minutes, they're going to. But if you're taking 1 minute to type things down, they don't mind. Ask them. You can document and talk at the same time, right? You can have a conversation and document things. So just doing it. And then for me, when you get in your car, take those 5 minutes and get as much information down as you can in those 5 minutes, and then move on to your next drive, right? Get as much information as you can down. If you have a hard time getting your information down in the home, take those 5 minutes. 5 minutes isn't a long time in your day, and document as much as you can, because you'll get more done in that 5 minutes than you will at home when you're distracted with other things. That 5 minutes could be 30 minutes at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it would be kind of a combination of what you guys both just said. I would say set small goals. So like Dan, you're saying like, I'm going to see 6 people today. I'm going to have all their subjectives done. I'm going to have all the vital, like whatever information, start setting small goals, but then also make sure that, you know, you prioritize the sections that are most important, right? The ones that you can't go back to because you're going to forget something, right? Like, so as I'm going to visit, hey, you know, if I get all my exercises in, I know what I can say for my assessment, or if I put this. So I think it's prioritization and setting small goals. And then, you know, over time, you just got to challenge yourself, right? We all learn about SMART goals. Well, make it smart, right? Make it measurable, make it attainable, and all that type of stuff. So long story short, you know, start small, work up, but it takes time. I mean, I wasn't perfect. I'm still not perfect now. I'll admit it, right? And I'm always learning about how to be more efficient myself. So,
Brendan, we all know that you're not perfect.
But the Eagles are.
Oh my God. As a Lions fan, I don't even know. I just have to get through the next couple of weeks. I don't have to hear about it anymore. Oh, well, as usual, you guys are amazing. Great information, great insights, great suggestions. And, you know, obviously there's a theme. And I think the advice to just, you know, tomorrow's a new day. Start it with trying this and not feeling guilty. Otherwise, you know, you're ultimately just doing a disservice. So I think great message. I think it hopefully hit home with everybody. And until next time, I want you guys all to have a wonderful day.